So we are now live. Hello Jen, good to see you. And we're just waiting for the esteemed Professor Malaev of Babel to join us. And it looks like he's going to be joining us now. So today we're going to be talking about issues and problems or questions that you have about your own process as an actor or about acting in general. And we've got quite a few questions to get through today. So we're still just waiting for Andrei Biziorek Babel to join us. And if you have any questions that you haven't sent through to us and you would like to, please feel free to do that. I can't promise that we'll get to all the questions today because we've got quite a few that were sent in to us. So we're going to try to address them in groups because a lot of the questions were similar in nature. So we're going to address them in kind of themes or groups. And hopefully that will kind of help to answer quite a few people's questions. And as I say, if you have any questions yourself, please put them in the chat. So I'm just going to check if Andrei is there with us. We're also going to be talking a little bit about the new 2-year certificate acting program and the Demidov Technique that we've just launched through the association, of which Andrei is the head, and that's going to be starting this October. So I'm going to be asking Andrei to speak a little bit about that. Applications are still open for that for people who may be interested. And that starts on October 4. That's a 2-year program. And it's something we've been kind of looking at for a long time, and I know that Andrei he's had it in mind for quite a long time as well. So we are really looking at, we finally got it off the ground, which is wonderful, really wonderful. So, just give me 1 second, guys. Looks like Andrei is having a little bit of trouble joining. 1 second. A few technical difficulties.
I think I'm here now.
There you are.
I've been requesting this access for some time, but you didn't want me here, Andrei. What's going on?
This time all to myself, Andrei, all to myself. So, welcome. Great to see you.
Thank you. Very good to see you, and very good to see everybody who is joining us. And I was hearing great introduction. We will talk about everything that interests our actors and directors and teachers. And I think that these themes are rather unanimous, right, Andrei? We received questions from different individuals, and thank you so much for doing this. But we immediately broke them into 4 different categories, right? And looks like people are interested in some very, very common themes, right? It's interesting how people are unanimous in this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And as I say, hopefully the way we've grouped them will help to address the kind of multitude of questions that we've got.
Absolutely.
But I wondered, first of all, Andrei, if you wouldn't mind speaking a little bit about what I started to introduce before you came online. A little bit about why the association was set up and the new 2-year certificate course, which I think may be interesting for some people to hear.
Yes, association was set up because prior to 2016, when I was fortunate to publish Demidov in English, Nobody heard of Demidov in the English-speaking world. And now, let's think about it. Only 5 years later, right? We have a lot of people who are claiming that they're teaching Demidov. And of course, can you master something that you never heard of in 5 years? So the reason why we set up the association is to send a message of what it is. Because when somebody is teaching them, they're usually plucking very narrow aspect of the Demidov school and selling it as Demidov. And nobody is there to give people the entire context and to explain this is what it is. Stanislavski created a system. Michael Chekhov created what he called technique. American method is method. It says it right there. Demidov created a school. And in the Demidov archive, which very few people have access to, and people who have access to don't care to study it, I found an outline of a 4-year course, which of course is adhering to the Russian style or European style acting conservatory, a 4-year course where the Demidov curriculum is allocated very carefully and strategically throughout the 4 years of training. And I understood that we are dealing with 4 particular sections of training that Demidov wanted to actually introduce his students to, or wanted to have them master, or if he would say, as he would say, automatize these skills. And while 4 years can be divided into perhaps 4 semesters, it still is a very particular school with a very particular sequence, with a very particular method of teaching. And being a school, you immediately understand that it is something that takes several years to master.
Yeah.
Demidov also says you cannot master it unless guided by an expert. On one hand. On the other hand, you only can teach yourself. So it's a combination of needing an expert to take you through this and also working tirelessly on your homework, on your scales. So this is where it is quite clear that nobody could have mastered it in 6 years. I've been fortunate to have access to these materials since 2006, before even the entirety of the Demidov heritage was published in Russian. I've been able to get hold of these materials and work on introducing my students to it, on developing this curriculum in my graduate classroom, and gradually training with my students, so to speak. I arrived at certain achievements some 12 years later, right? So, and this is where it was important for the association to send the message in terms of this is what complete Demidov is. Yeah. And those are the standards, and those are the goals, and those are the heightened ideals that Demidov introduces. And then people can actually decide on their own where they want to study it, how they want to go about it, which is why we introduced this 2-year actor certification course. That is an online course. Allowing people from all over the world to actually not only be introduced to the Demidov curriculum, but to delve deeply into it and to develop those instincts that Demidov is talking about, that are working as their default, no matter which situation they're in. Yeah. And that brings us to questions, because of course, these questions are about what do I do in this situation? What do I do in that situation, right? How do I prepare for it? And the number one answer to all of the questions is, if you have developed those instincts that Demidov is actually teaching us to develop, those reflexes, those instincts, those automatisms, then they kick in on their own. You don't have to apply them. You don't have to worry about how to do all these things that our actors are asking us about. It simply takes care of itself. But that means that somebody is fully rooted in the Demidov curriculum, which is exactly what this 2-year course is about. And A lot of answers are simply lack of training, right? Or sufficient training that allows me to meet all of these challenges firsthand. So I'm not going to obviously just say, sign up for the course.
Yeah.
Because people who can sign up for the course will do that. I mean, they already done that because we are down to, I think we have something like 2 spaces or a little bit more perhaps left in the course. It's not a lot of spaces left there, but nevertheless, it's training that takes place over a period of 2 years, right? It is a very elaborate structure of certifying master teacher working, course leaders working, guest teachers working. It's 3 days a week, right? 2.5 hours a day, 3 days a week, with breaks, obviously, and breaks for the summer and fall break and spring break, but nevertheless, or winter break and spring break. But nevertheless, it's a commitment, right? Serious commitment, and it's unprecedented. So that would be an easy answer. Enroll, right? But let's talk about what to do, nevertheless.
Before you do that, sorry to interrupt, but I think it's worth pointing out also, Andrei, the fact that it's online.
Correct.
Because a lot of actors I know tend to balk a little bit at online acting courses, and understandably so.
Yeah.
But the way we're working, the way you worked out to work on Zoom is extremely effective. I mean, it's extremely effective. And the way we're all working now in the Demidov work.
I've been doing it since March of 2020 when I was forced to do it by my university, bless their soul, right? Because I just could not be in the same space with my students anymore. And as every FT teacher in the world, I thought that was the end of it.
Yeah.
And I went into my first Zoom class thinking that's it. And I was pretending for the sake of my students that I've always been doing it like that, right? That everything is going to go just fine. And then when Demidov adapted to that beautifully and started producing results that were often better than when we were in the same space, I was once more flabbergasted about the power of this school, about the sheer effectivity of this school. And I'm reminded of that almost every day. So yes, by now I have tremendous experience of doing it in Zoom, and the effectivity is outstanding. But Andrei, recently I went back into space and was required or asked by my university that all of my students wear masks.
Yeah.
And I thought that that was going to be the end of it. And halfway through the first class, I realized, oh my God, as soon as the actors become characters, transform, enter into the etudes, masks disappear.
Yeah.
Just like the convention of the flat screen in front of me and my partner being part of the flat screen and their space not being accessible to me disappears. And I feel that I'm in their space and they're in my space and we are together completely, because the truth of Demidov school is overpowering this convention in the very same way it's overpowering the convention of wearing a mask, where suddenly you realize, oh my God, I don't see that mask, but how is it possible? And then at the end of the first week, I asked my students, do you realize that masks disappeared? And they said, yes, we realize that. We don't see any masks. We see our partner, but we don't see the mask. How is it possible throughout the entire period, right, between March and now, March 2020 and now, my actors were in their houses, in their homes. Their domestic animals made multiple appearances during etudes. And according to everything we know, these animals should have wiped them off the screen. Guess what? I did not look at the animals at all. I only looked at the actors. If actors decided to interact with that animal and it became part of the story, so to speak, then yes, I noticed the animal. Rather than that, I did not notice the animal.
Yeah, there's a greater truth.
What power does this school have? What tremendous power. I am surprised, right? I've been working with this school longer than anyone on this planet, right? But I am surprised at what is really going on.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. It's really extraordinary. And it never ceases to amaze me either when I'm working on Zoom. That you know, when the physical space becomes one, when the
Yeah.
emotional space is also becomes one.
As soon as the emotional space is actually established between the two or more actors, they're no longer separated by different spaces. They feel completely in the same place, in the same space, and we as audience feel them to be completely in the same space, and the partnership is flawless.
Yeah, and I think that's why the people who have worked with us recognized that immediately, and you know that's why they kind of signed up for the 2-year program, because they saw
Yeah,
the power of this online, and it also gives them a chance to work with an international ensemble, right? Not just kind of
exactly. Yeah, exactly. International ensemble. Yeah. It is
yeah,
so enriching. Peter Brook understood that right long time ago, how enriching it is to bring people from different countries, from different nations, right, together, and what an incredibly enriching experience it is. And that's exactly what we are able to do because of this opportunity to do it via Zoom.
yeah, yeah. Um, if people do want to check that out, not that we're trying to push it on anybody, but if people do want to
No,
check it out, please, you can go to demidovassociation.com and just click on the acting course,
yeah.
demidovassociation.com, and
Check
that's it.
out demidovassociation.com simply because not only the acting courses there, but a lot of information about what we are doing as association, our chapters in Moscow, in London, in Athens, in Chicago, right? All of that information is there, and much more. So check it out. One of the main reasons behind the association is to spread the message, right? The 2-year acting certificate course, yes, of course, we are not selling it because you need to arrive at it. It needs to be something that you are really committed to. And people who are committing to it are saying, I have to do it. There's no
Exactly.
question, right? They feel I have to do it, I must do it. And so, needless to say, right, it's going to be a very intimate group. There are still spaces there, right? But it's already clear that it's going to be a very intimate group. There is going to be a lot of attention for every individual because it's something like for every teacher, there is 2 students. It's something like that. It's unprecedented, right? A lot of support and a tremendous opportunity, but a huge commitment as well in many ways, which is why we want you to know, right, that association is doing this, right? And of course, if somebody is interested in auditioning, there is still time because the course starts on October 4th. But yeah, it's something that is for those who are truly serious and committed and interested.
It's something we're really excited about because it's really the only place to explore the curriculum almost in its entirety, right?
It is the only place where you can actually develop this as your default, as your habit, as your indestructible instinct that then take you into auditioning, into rehearsal periods that can be very short, right? Into being able to be that character on day one in rehearsals, which is really important when you're filming, right? Film will be a part of that course because, of course, this being on Zoom, it creates perfect conditions to teach Demidov in application to film. The summer course, which we did in July, annual summer course, 5th annual summer course. We started them in 2017 in Russia, and now obviously they were in Zoom for the last 2 summers. So the summer course, most recent one, was dedicated to film acting. And it's clear how Zoom is allowing us to address that because guess what? We're all inside a frame. Guess what? We are being filmed, right? Guess what? All of the things connected with these particular peculiarities and restrictions, right? And particular things that this media is introducing as requirements. And there are a lot of people who feel, oh, you can't live on screen because of how many requirements you need to fulfill. You need to hit that mark, you need to hit that mark, right? It's impossible to freely live and be your character because you're cheating right and left. Yes, that's true. If you don't have this technique, with this technique, you don't actually have to cheat because all these things are happening on their own while you live as character.
Right.
So yeah, so that's another interesting aspect of the work.
And I think that's probably a nice segue into our first category of questions.
Please, Andrei.
Which is about auditioning and working with sides, the way actors, you know, that we are very often just getting, you know, a couple of sides and not much information, not much character description.
Yeah.
And then you're expected to, you know, produce something whole out of this very fragmented piece. So the first question we have is, how do you address the issue of sides that are given to actors where they only have one day to put themselves on tape? And the second question, which is related, how to prepare for auditions when you have a very little time and only a couple of sides with very limited character description. So there's a very two, you know, related questions.
Brilliant, brilliant questions. Thank you. Well, let's look at what Demidov introduced. He introduced the so-called Demidov etudes that are the foundation of training, where you are given sides, you are giving words.
Yeah.
These words can be, how do you like this weather? Right? Question, answer, the weather is great, right? And they can be much more elaborate, obviously. But you're giving words. You're not told who you are. You're not told who your partner is. You're not told the circumstances. You're not told what you want from the partner, what the partner wants from you. You're not told where this is taking place and the history between the two people. And then, through very particular technique of repeating the lines in a certain way, then discarding them in a certain way, emptying, and through very particular technique of green lighting and surrender to your actual creative urges, which is not as easy as it may sound, right? Given freedom, actors very often cannot take it because they don't have the skill to take it.
Right.
But through all of these techniques, suddenly all of it materializes. Circumstances materialize, relationships, motivation, so to speak, objectives. Certainly the space materializes for the actors, their past, their present, and their future. All of it takes care of itself.
Yeah.
So can you possibly have better training than the Demidov technique to prepare you for the situation that is constantly happening when you are given sides, text? You don't have the entirety of the script. You don't, right? Even if you have the entirety of the script, it's given to you at the last moment very often, so you are facing a choice to read the script or to memorize the lines, and you would rather be off book on your lines sometimes, right? Also, how often actors are called to do a shoot tomorrow because the actor or the actress just fell sick, and so they're brought on location, they're given sides, and they're said, go. Because the time is ticking, and in film, time is money, right? And if they can do credible job, how do you do credible job? How do you guess? I'll explain. Part of the experiments that we've done with the Demidov technique is this, and it's easy to do with younger actors. I would take a classical dialogue from a classical play. Maybe I would slightly disguise it. And then I would give it to the actors who are not suspecting that this is from the Seagull or this is from King Lear. They had no idea. And then they would repeat it, and then they would go on stage not knowing who they are playing, what the relationships are with the partner or what the circumstances are. And guess what? When they then talked about the circumstances, and everyone watching them talked about the circumstances and characters that just appeared in an instance, everybody quoted the circumstances of the play. So then, and the characters from the play. So then when I asked afterwards, do you realize what you just played? Do you realize that you were Kostya Trepliv and then you were Nina from the Seagull? They said, oh my God, you're right. What does it mean? It means that if your intuition is trained appropriately, you don't need to read the whole play.
Yeah.
You can actually use this technique, right? And again, you cannot use it unless you are trained in it.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I mean? This technique is not going to work with someone who did not train because they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
But if they're trained, it is very clear that when they're given sides, given couple of texts, the entirety of the script, the entirety of the character is also materializing. The relationships are materializing. The larger circumstances of the script as a whole are materializing. And no director will ever be dissatisfied. And no director will ever say, what on earth did you play? Because if it's a good script, and even if it's not a very good script, the entirety of it is encoded in that little dialogue because that character still speaks like that character. Because most authors, and scripts are nowadays written by very good authors, ladies and gentlemen, most authors are giving to the actor in that segment of the dialogue knowledge of all the circumstances that they need to know of and who they are, so that they don't need to even read the rest of it, right? Shakespeare certainly does it. So that's how it happens, where if you are trained in Demidov, you don't even need actually to read the whole script. The script will just overwhelm you in its entirety if you are trying to do it all overnight when you have to do this thing tomorrow. But if you are developing your intuition the way that Demidov is developing it in you, you can actually assign these lines, just go over these lines, and then use the technique to create a character that definitely belongs to that script, right? And to be that character decisively, powerfully, and courageously.
It's a very interesting thing, Andrei, because I've been working lately with a lot of actors who are working on self-tapes, and all they have is a couple of sides.
Yeah.
Or they have an audition coming up. And that's exactly how I just work with them on that small fragment of text as an etude. And it's amazing what they start to perceive.
Yeah.
Character, relationship, circumstances, all out of that small
and
fragment.
how it is always true to the larger script, miraculously, but not miraculously, because remember, Demidov is developing intuition.
Yeah.
And intuition knows hell of a lot more than our brain knows, right? Intuition can travel into the kind of places, our subconscious can travel into the kind of places and gather knowledge in those places that are not actually accessible to our intellectual brain. So it is not a miracle at all. It looks like a miracle, but actually it is training. If you are trained in it, you are beautifully qualified to nail that addition, right? Or to not worry about missing that character and playing something else that's not in the script, because the script simply wasn't given to you, or you didn't have time to study it thoroughly.
Yeah. And those actors that I work with are often very surprised that what they ostensibly came up with was how well it fit into the overall journey of the character in the script as a whole. So what you're saying is absolutely accurate, and I've experienced that firsthand with many times, right? With actors working on auditions or about to self-tape. It's a very interesting phenomenon that happens in this work. Very good. Is there anything else you'd like to say about that, Andrei, before
No, I think we should move to the next theme, right? Because I think the very nature of the etude of the Demidov work, right, speaks for itself. I just explained very briefly the construction of the Demidov etude, where you're given sides, right? And suddenly you physically recreate, emotionally recreate the whole without ever being given that whole. So what training can prepare you better, possibly, to what our actors are asking about, to being able to step into a couple of sides and be true to the whole of the script that they do not know or didn't have time to thoroughly work with.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Sure.
So there's a very interesting question that I get a lot, actually, in this next little section, which is about how do you work with this technique with actors, let's say on a play or on a film, with actors and a director who don't know the work and who are, let's say, not necessarily as free as we would like them to be, how to work with them and when they don't understand what we're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. Instead of giving a lecture, may I tell a story? May I tell an anecdote?
Please do.
I have an actor who trained with me, wonderful actress, who, while still being a student, secured the role of Regina in Ibsen's Ghosts. So it's a significant role of a younger, lady, and she was acting obviously against older actors. And those of you who know the play know that Regina has a scene with Pastor Manders, who is an older gentleman, and it's quite a significant scene. And so they performed it for a while, and suddenly that actor, older actor, came to my student and said, "What you are doing is amazing. I'm just in awe because you are never the same. Every performance you are different. You don't repeat what you are doing. It's absolutely mesmerizing. But please, could you stop doing it? Because I forget my lines. I need predictability, right?" And she said, absolutely, because in our technique, we have ways, right, of actually doing the same thing outwardly while improvising inwardly. So that the subtleties are different, the subtle details are different, but nobody knows, right, that you're deviating from particular choreography, so to speak. And so she started doing it, but he was an older actor. So one time he still forgot his lines. And the blocking was such that he was seated on one side of the stage and she was on the opposite side of the stage. And the silence was becoming really menacing. And she couldn't help him. Suddenly, this actress got up, crossed across the entire stage, peacefully, as if she was dusting something or doing something, right? Sat next to him, took his hand into hers, started petting it. He calmed down, remembered the lines, and the scene went smoothly. So you see, the very same thing that actually interfered with his mechanical process saved him. Because if she wasn't trained in Demidov, she would not be able to improvise so freely, this completely different blocking. She would keep sitting on the other side of the stage, right? And ultimately, I don't know what they would have to do. Probably they would have to close the curtain because he was going also into a nervous frenzy, but she was able to calm him down, right? So that's my answer to that question in the form of an anecdote. And with every parable, those who can understand me, I think will understand.
I think there's another aspect to that also, which is about rehearsing with actors when who don't understand, the technique of assigning, of emptying, of giving yourself freedom, of not working with actions and objectives, of actioning everything to the nth degree, with actors, but also with directors who perhaps insist on that. Maybe it might be worth saying a little something about kind of working in this way with directors.
Directors insist on anything less and less and less, Andrei, because they're given less and less time to rehearse. So when they see a credible actor who is prepared like a Demidov actor would be and who is bringing something very tangible and very true to the play and ultimately very powerful to the first rehearsal, guess what? They begin to look elsewhere because they've got a lot of other actors who are not there yet. More importantly, they begin to adapt their plans to cater what you are giving, because you are giving something, right? And they are liking it. And ultimately, they don't want to spend time where it is not needed. They see that you're carrying the play. They see that you're carrying the scene. And then they concentrate on choreographing traffic around you, ultimately. So that would be the best thing to do. Now, you have to remember that when you're playing the junior league, directors micromanage you. When you are moving into the higher league, directors stop micromanaging you. A good example is Clint Eastwood, right? One very important but young actress that was invited by Clint Eastwood to be in his movie. Right before the shoot, came to Eastwood and said, "Mr. Eastwood, what do you want me to do in this scene?" He looked at her angrily, said, "I hired you," and left.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I hired you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what to do in this scene. I trust you to do this scene. I hired you. What more do you want? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, that's
so
true.
Again, it all depends. Yes, if you are in the amateur theatricals, you will be constantly micromanaged by directors who don't trust themselves.
Exactly.
They don't have any confidence in themselves. That's why they don't trust you as an actor.
Yeah.
So try to get out of that league as soon as possible, right? And the more trained you are, right? And that's exactly what we are offering to actors through the association. The more trained you are, the sooner you will get out of the situations when you're micromanaged, right?
Yeah.
And will be in the situations where you are a collaborator. So that would be kind of my answer to that. In terms of working with wooden partners, mechanical partners, as I said, directors more and more, right? They just don't care, right? If they begin to choreograph you, begin to micromanage you, block you, and so on, Demidov has this wonderful technique of assigning. You assign it, and then your freedom remains, but it becomes more of an inner freedom. Improvisation becomes more of an inner than outer improvisation. In terms of partners, let's remember the great tragic stars, the great tragedians of the past. They were traveling tragedians mostly. They would go into provincial theaters, and in these provincial theaters, they would perform their famous repertoire, right, against semi-amateurs, right? And these amateurs who surrounded them in the town where they came, local actors, they were wooden, they were theatrical. And so they would perform like this, right? And a traveling star would show up in rehearsal and would perform like this. He would just talk to them like a real person. And they kept answering back like this. And he kept talking to them. He was indestructible, right? He just wouldn't budge. Just kept talking to them as a real person.
Yeah.
And then he would come to them, and again, something about touch, right? He would take their hand in his and press it, and he would look them straight in the eye. And suddenly they woke up. They saw him for the first time. And suddenly, instead of speaking like that, right, when I don't see anyone I'm talking to the audience, really, not to my partner, they suddenly started answering him directly. So you see, you can do things, even to your partner in rehearsal, to bring them onto your side, to bring them onto the side of living on stage or on screen, right? But the main thing, I think, is to get training, and to get the hell out of that league and that theater and that film student production, right, where you're micromanaged to the inch of your life.
Yeah. It's also worth, you know, if it's possible with a scene partner who, you know, doesn't work in this way, to try to form an alliance with them, just to take them aside and say, look, would you, this is kind of how I'm working, would you help me assign the lines? And just explain a little bit about what's going on in the process. And I think it sort of alleviates some of the fear of, you know, this kind of unpredictability and spontaneity.
Absolutely. And actors love running lines, so that if you suggest to them, let's run lines, but listen, this is how I run them, right? Absolutely, they'll go for it, because also actors are curious about different techniques, right? Unfortunately, they're too curious, right? Because all they're doing is trying this technique to find out it's not working, right? And then switching to that technique to find out, oh, that's not working either. And then they're trying this technique because they're usually taught by charlatans, or they are, you know, not doing their work the way that they're supposed to. And then they arrive at Demidov, and usually they get stuck there, right? Let's face it. I have seen very few actors who were able to let go of this. because it's gripping actors, because it's speaking to their intuition, to their subconscious, to their instinct, to their actor's instinct. And actor's instinct is indestructible. No matter what all these schools are doing to you, right? Your instinct still would burst out if given a chance, and Demidov is giving it a chance.
Yeah.
So you become an instinctual actor, but the instinct is not something that is mysterious, unpredictable, or unreliable. Instinct is the most indestructible part of you. So if you create conditions through the Demidov training, right, to actually inspire that instinct, it will always be at your command. It will begin to be a reliable tool. So actors are curious, always curious, for better or for worse. So they will work with you, they will, and you will be able to actually do that backstage and pre-set certain conditions that will make your life with them on stage more enjoyable, truthful, more improvisational, more spontaneous, intuitive, and live.
It's an interesting thing about curiosity, because when I was directing something at a drama school here in London, the actors would go out into another room to assign in pairs, assign their text, and people would just pass by the other students, and they would hear them assigning, and they would say, "Oh, what are you doing? It sounds interesting." And they got sort of hooked in this way, and a couple of those are now actors that we work with quite a lot, who you know well. So it's an interesting thing about that sense of curiosity. It's not that they want to, shun it. They are curious about it. And I think
yes,
you're right.
but hear me, Andrei. Hear what I'm saying as well. When actors are curious about a bag of tricks, ooh, interesting trick, let me borrow it. Oh, another interesting device, let me borrow it. They're missing the power of the Demidov school. Absolutely. Right? Because right and left, even my students, unfortunately, they're just packaging a small segment of what is a powerful school. And everybody begins to think, oh, that's Demidov, that's Demidov, that's Demidov, right? And the whole thing becomes like a parable about a blind person describing, or several blind people describing an elephant, right? One says that it's round like a column, another says that it's thin like rope, right? So one of them touched the leg, another one touched the tail, right? And so on. And that's the elephant. That's not the elephant, right? The culture of calm, for example, losing the body, that is now being packaged as a separate thing, right? As if it is of any use to an actor if that actor is not trained in the instinct of freedom, right? Exactly. But no, they're packaging the calm as a separate thing. Now they'll be packaging assigning, this particular way of learning your lines, right, as a separate thing. It is useless if you are not taking advantage of the most important thing that will make you a unique individual and powerful actor who is capable of stepping into any role like that. And that is, of course, the Demidov etudes, that exercise, right, that while it is modified in a certain way by an expert as you're training through the use of it, right? It is nevertheless working the totality of the actor's process, the totality of the skills and the qualities that the actor is supposed to acquire, the totality of the experience that he is supposed to go through, right, or she, right? And instead of dividing it into elements, dividing it into something that is packaged separately, Demidov is working you in your totality as an actor. And that's important, because if you are dividing it into separate devices, tricks, separate techniques, right, separate toolkits, right, or tools that belong to your toolkit, right, you're missing the point. The creative state is indivisible. What's happening with you when you are stepping onto the stage is indivisible. It does not consist of devices, tricks, tools. It is something very simple. You know how to live on stage, or you don't know how to live on stage. And it's trained from day one by Demidov, and it's trained in a way that it is leaving you with scales that you can perform on a daily basis. And that will sustain you through the rest of your career. But it takes, again, a serious, very serious training under the guidance of an expert in order to acquire this as a bulletproof technique, as a bulletproof process that becomes your default, and you're doing it without applying it. Because as long as you have to apply this, which is what's done with a bag of tricks, you can't transform because you are working to apply your technique. Every musician knows as soon as they begin to think technique, their playing becomes mechanical, right? Because they're not able to endow it with emotion anymore. They're not able to transform in their own way. So this is where it is not as simple, right? And while certainly Michael Chekhov technique, for example, is a great technique, but everybody knows in Hollywood that it's a great way to nail a take. And that's something else entirely. Nailing a take or leaving uninterruptedly, truthfully, creatively, for the duration of a 2-hour performance, right? Or instead of nailing one take, giving director 5 takes to choose from that are equally brilliant. And while they adhere to continuity, they are creating so much variety for the editor and director to choose from. That's what Demidov is about, and that's what it should be.
Yeah. I find that the actors who are just looking for, who come to this work, who are just looking for another tool to put in the box, they don't tend to hang around very long.
Well, and maybe it's a good thing.
Yeah, but what they do with it after, you know, who God knows. But because they realize very quickly that it takes a lot of commitment, it takes a lot of, you know, daily practice, and it's not about trying to achieve a result.
It is not for everyone in that respect. It works for everyone, there is no question. With an expert, right, the results are instantaneous, powerful, and it works with everyone and for everyone. But what's going to happen next is a different story.
Absolutely. Very good. Well, I'm just aware of time, so maybe we can move on.
Let's move to the next group of questions.
So the next is about approaching character. How do you approach character when you start working on a play or a film? How do you practically preserve the energy and accumulate the character in rehearsals so that in the actual performance, the actor does not need to push or squeeze or become tense? How does the energy get wasted? How can I preserve it? How can I practice accumulation by myself at home? That's a whole bunch of questions in one question.
Yes, absolutely. These are great questions. And the answer is, again, twifold, right? The answer can be divided into shortcut kind of answer and the real answer. And the real answer is these things take care of themselves. If you are training in this school, not technique, not method, right? Not system, school, because look at what happens in etudes, which is the foundation of the training, the Demidov etudes. You are given the text, right? You create a character out of that text. You create a character out of that text instantaneously. You learn how to surrender to that character that is foreign to you. Because one of the questions was, how do you know if you're playing yourself, if you're playing your habitual character, your habitual mask, right? Or if you're actually transforming? Well, that's the job that's my job, that's Andrei's job, that's the job of an expert, to teach you how to divorce your habitual mask that you're most comfortable playing, but that, let's face it, doesn't fit every character and every play, right? And how to yield to your true creative instinct to transform, because that's what actor's instinct is, to transform, to become someone else, while actually participating in everything that someone else is doing and living intimately, personally, and fully. So do you see, etudes are training this from day one. You are given a text and then you are there to embody it. You are training to embody it, to become the words, to extract characters out of the words and to create them. to manifest them, to extract circumstances out of the words, right? And to have them materialize in the space around you and then being bounced by these, circumstances and propelled into action by these circumstances instead of squeezing action out of yourself. So it's a completely different universe, ultimately.
Yeah.
And so if you go through this training, then character kind of takes care of itself. All of it takes care of itself. However, the other part of the question has something to do with energy. And that is a very important question.
Yes.
Because even if you're trained, unless you know how to preserve energy, unless you know how to accumulate energy, unless you understand that the nature of character, circumstances, and everything else that we are dealing with on stage or on screen is energy. They're all made of energy. But not the kind of energy that you encounter if you put these two fingers into an electric outlet. It's not going to be 110 or 220. It is something that Demidov calls weak currents, subtle, weak, delicate currents of energy. And you need to know that the origin of character is weak currents, and the accumulation of these weak currents, the preservation of that energy for the performance, the use of the energy of the audience and many other energies that surround us, which we need to know how to channel. Right? Tragedians knew how to channel it. Because tragedians could get up on stage, and with them, 3,000 people at the Bolshoi Theater, where drama used to be performed in Russia at that time, right? They would also rise. So what kind of energy did this actor possess? Of course, they did not possess that energy. They used some other energies that they had access to bring these 3,000 people up on their feet. So that question is paramount. It is addressed in daily training. So the best way to do it is to engage in daily training, right? But simply know that for the most part, the day before the performance, right, you want to accumulate, you want to rest, you want to go and spend some time in nature, especially if it's an emotionally draining performance. You don't want to be out and about. You want to become a recluse. You want to become a monk, right? And that alone is a wonderful preparation. Now, having said that, right, that is the culture of calm. But you also need to be warm. You also need to warm up your character. You need to warm up your circumstances. You need to magnetize, right, the circumstances so that they gain power over you, right? You need to magnetize yourself so you actually are manipulatable by the circumstances. And all of that is also a science of sorts. But again, it's happening in etudes every day. And so if you're engaged in daily training of the Demidov school, then it takes care of itself. Now, if you're trying to do it from the perspective of that bag of tricks, then you're missing a lot, right? You will get results, you will get results that will still be tangible, but they're just not going to be as powerful as you want them to be.
I would also say, just to the second part of that question about how do I know that this is the character I've greenlit and not yourself, I wouldn't worry about that. I really wouldn't worry about that. Just work on that, the ability to surrender to what comes, and that will take care of itself.
Yes, I agree, Andrei. The issue exists. There's no question about it. It's a valid question, but
as soon as you start to think, am I surrendering to the character, or is this me? You're already in your head.
You're already in your head, and you are beginning to pick and choose, right, what you're going to green light and what you're not going to green light. That's not the way to start your training, right? At the start of training, there is no distinction between you and not you, between you and character. Right, absolutely. And you are best served to surrender to your personal thoughts, to your personal memories, to your personal mannerisms, and that will eventually take you into character, eventually, instantaneously will take you into character. Will that character still be limited to your everyday persona, so to speak, or one of the stage personas that you've kind of practiced? Perhaps in the earlier parts of training, right? But you're right, it shouldn't be your concern. It should be your teacher's concern. It should be the expert's concern to teach you how to become transformable and how to learn the skill of transforming into every character instantaneously, or at least right through the work that is meaningful. But yes, Andrei, you are speaking, I think, from the perspective of a teacher and giving an advice to an actor who is probably at the very start of their training, right? And in which case you are giving the right advice. Don't worry about it. Master how to surrender, how to green light what is happening to you at the moment.
Exactly. So, Andrei, we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm just aware of that. I think this is an interesting question, so maybe if we just could give a brief answer to it, if it's possible. And this is from Mariana, actually, from Czech Republic. If we want to fully understand the work and method of Demidov, should we study the life and work of Stanislavski? That's the first part of the question. When you are a specialist of Stanislavski, Vachtangoff, Chekhov, Demidov, does one stay objective and not blindly follow one path and deny other methods?
I have a suggestion, Andrei. Next Saturday, same time.
We should keep that for another session.
No, literally, I mean, this is a huge question, right? And there are several of that kind. I suggest next Saturday, same time here, let's talk about that. Let's make it a theme. Yeah.
Very good idea. I think that's a wonderful idea.
Rather than shortchanging the wonderful question. Yep.
I think that's great. It's a great question.
So you probably need to end the meeting so that you could save it, right? Because if you don't save it until a certain time, right, I think it kind of disappears, right? Good luck to you.
Intricacies of Instagram, I'm still not. I'm a bit of a neophyte when it comes to this.
I see, I see. Well, good luck to you. I hope you can save it so we could also post it so that people who are not with us right now could actually experience it. Thank you. I just want to thank you, Andrei, for hosting. And I want to thank everyone who joined us. Such a joy to have you here. And my God, your questions are amazing and very timely and incredibly important.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Andrei, first of all, for joining me today. And thank you, everyone who watched. And as Andrei just proposed, let's do it again next Saturday, same time.
See you in a week. See you in a week. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.